The next morning when day broke, I thought we had dodged the bullet.
The water just kept coming, and then it kept rising.
And people actually died inside the roof of their homes because they didn't have an axe.
They're trying to get out.
We begin to see people from the nearby housing projects. People begin to wade through the water, trying to get to higher ground.
It was a humanitarian crisis like America had not seen before.
The human cost, almost 1,500 people died within a couple of hours. This wasn't a disaster, it was a catastrophe.
The failure of the construction, they had what are called T-walls here, and they just weren't built well into the ground so that the pressure just toppled them over. And if you could imagine, there was water out here up to near the top of those walls, but they just flopped over like that. So that water, that huge pile of water that had been pushed into the industrial canal right here, flooded this neighborhood, and it just rushed through those homes, sweeping those homes on there to the east. And then the other flood walls failed and more of New Orleans was underwater.
I mean, when you look at this and you look out at some of the homes and the grass here, all of this inundated by the water, people on their roofs just trying to get attention from whoever they could, whether it be helicopters or first responders, so that their lives could be saved. And yet first responders were also in the same predicament, trying to save their own lives while trying to save others. I mean, nearly 1,400 people lost their lives in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and we look at the devastation. But you know, Brian, it's interesting. Katrina transcends more than just a weather story, right? It's one of the biggest news stories of our lifetime and will historically be remembered forever in the world of not only forecasting, but natural disasters.
Well, you know, prior to Katrina, we had eye walls here, which is just what the name implies. Looks like the letter I, is sheet piling with concrete on top. And what we did after Katrina, what we learned was an inverted T-wall works very well.
We had no idea what was going to be the result of the levees breaking, the actual force of Katrina. I mean, it totally destroyed our city.
New Orleans was reasonably well prepared. They had an evacuation plan, but the problem was that they had Hurricane Ivan the year before. They evacuated and they ended up not needing to. So they were very reluctant to pull that string. Finally, the National Hurricane Center got involved, put pressure on them. They went ahead and evacuated. There are a lot of other things wrong with the emergency system there in the New Orleans area, especially in Orleans Parish.
With Katrina, we knew, you know, such a large and powerful hurricane that it would likely cause a large loss of life, and we just wanted to make the best forecast possible and be sure we communicated that.
There were times where I had to sort of center myself, but I remember being on that night and holding back tears because we just knew that this would be an absolute catastrophe. And the one thing that I remembered, you know, waking up the next morning, is one of the most urgent messages from the National Weather Service I've ever read in my career. And that was from Robert Ricks from NWS in New Orleans. And his language really put a perspective on it, how bad it could be. And I remember being on air and telling producers, I want to read the entire thing. I've never done that before. But we spent 2-3 minutes just reading Robert Ricks's urgent message on the potential of what this storm could do.
We woke up to this, and the news reporter standing on his roof saying, you know, you're going to be up here with snakes and rats. So we met at Johnny White's, and we told everybody, okay, we'll see you Thursday. We thought it was going to be a few days that we would be gone, and it ended up being a month.
The scale of the death is on the same order of magnitude as 9/11. or at the Titanic. And here we are 100 years later, and we're still talking about the Titanic. And I expect that 80 years from now, we're still going to be talking about the catastrophe that happened when a very moderate wind and rain hurricane hit New Orleans and caused all these levees around us to topple. This is probably, it is the last house that still has not been put back into the housing stock and is here for a learning instrument within a stone's throw of a levee breach.
Yeah, 20 years later, Katrina is a sensory overload. I mean, when I think back at just the death and the bodies and the smells and the anguish of people, it is remarkable. It's scenes that will never leave me and who I am. I remember walking through the French Quarter and seeing a sheet and wondering what's under that sheet. And it was a dead person, a dead man, a soul, a person who lived their life. And someone had put the sheet over in the interim until that officials could come and pick that man up and take him out.
Words can't really articulate what we experienced in this hospital over 20 years ago. It was so devastating that I actually never returned to work for the system. They did the best they could in the circumstances. You couldn't really prepare for a Hurricane Katrina, not knowing the devastation that was really taking place because we're in this building, locked down, shut. We couldn't get out. So we had to put that aside and provide care for patients who needed us. It's nothing but the grace of God that kept us, because it is very traumatized. And that's, you have to move past it. You have to think about what you can do to make things better. Hurricane Katrina 20 years ago. I was a labor and delivery nurse. We were housed here for years. During hurricane season, we have what we call Code Gray, and I was on the activation team. And I volunteered because I normally do recovery. And to say it was devastating, words can't really articulate what we experienced in this hospital.
There's no electricity here, no food, no water.
That I actually never returned to work for the system. They did the best they could in the circumstances. You couldn't really prepare for a Hurricane Katrina. And so the day my husband and my daughter came, and it was coincidental that they happened to be here with me because my husband and daughter was to evacuate, and they were here with me for those 6 days. I was right here on the 5th floor in the research center, and you can see the fire escape, and you can see we have access to Tulane Avenue, and I just recall being a part of a team. We always say New Orleans are resilient, and we are. We were here to provide care, take care of patients. The camaraderie at first was exciting because we was here, and then storm hit. Woke up the day after the storm, and we looked outside, the sun was shining, and we was like, oh, it's not as bad as we thought it would be. And then lo and behold, I looked out the window, and it looked like a pool of water just coming down Tulane Avenue. People from the nearby housing projects, it's called the Levee housing projects, people begin to wade through the water, trying to get to higher ground, standing on the steps over there, trying to get to the interstate, trying to get to the Superdome, which is a few blocks away. As the days went on, each and every day, security would come and tell us, be prepared to leave. We're rolling out tomorrow. Tomorrow came. We never rolled out. They began to run out of food. So first we was getting plates of food. Now we were getting styrofoam cups of food. We got to get some food. And so right over here is Tulane Medical Center. And some people may not know, but there is an underground tunnel. And so we thought if we can get way through the water to get to Tulane, there has to be food in there because nobody's been there. Well, we get there were rats. We weren't expecting the rats to be in the water. We couldn't get to the food. So we had to turn around.
Hurricane Katrina has put millions of people in the dark, even in places like hospitals and nursing homes where a loss of power can mean death.
The only places that had the generator power were like the emergency department, ICU, and we would go down to the emergency department to charge our phones so we can, and our radios and what have you, so we can stay abreast of all the information. And the stairs were clear for many days. But then after a while, we begin to see bodies in the staircase.
There's absolutely no power, no electricity. People can't watch TV to get information. All they have are battery-powered AM radios.
I'm a minister, and so every day I will post signs on the unit telling people what day it was, giving them updated information that I heard on the radio from contacting FEMA, contacting whoever you needed to contact to get the resources you need. And I would just give them words of encouragement and just say, be strong in the Lord, have faith in God, we're going to get through this. It was just devastating. It was heartbreaking. Words can't really explain the experience that we had here. And in the midst of that, we were still providing care. We had a patient stayed at the hotel down the street, right a block away. Her water bag broke. She had to literally walk through the water. Got here, she went into labor. We were able to deliver her baby. We had another lady came in preterm labor. So we had a labor and delivery unit. Think about a MASH unit. They didn't have a labor and delivery set up here. We had to set the unit up, bringing all of our equipment down from the other hospital, set up a labor and delivery, set up a nursery, set up an NICU. And we had to provide care, not knowing what our homes would look like, not knowing the devastation that was really taking place because we're in this building locked up. So we had to put that aside and provide care for patients who needed us. When we got ready to leave, I felt like a refugee. They put us on the back of these 18-wheeler trucks. They didn't know where we were going. Destination unknown. They pulled up to the New Orleans International Airport. There were a sea of people. We will not get off. So then they took us to Baton Rouge, a convention center that had shut down, was not open, was not in operation. They somehow got it open. And we were there for the next few days until someone was able to come and get us. A dear friend who had family in Baton Rouge took us in, a single family home with over 10 people, for weeks, for months, until we were able to get back into the city to see what we can do. And because of my credentials as a healthcare provider, we were able to come back and check out our home. We had 9 feet of water. My husband lost his vehicle. Those are material things, but we lost everything. So it was devastating. And my daughter was 3 years old, a toddler. She had no idea what was going on. To experience that, what could we do? Just love her, hug her. She didn't know what was going on. And we didn't know what our future would look like. Thank God for, of course, insurance that only goes so far. Thank God for the help that we got from the government that only went so far. We were able to rebuild. We did rebuild. You know, we lost that home. We built a new home in Louisiana. We continue to take life, what they say, by the horns and just make it work. We did what we had to do, continue our professional careers, continue pursuing our education, continuing to provide for our family. We had to do it, and we did it. It's nothing but the grace of God that kept us, because it is very traumatizing. And that's, you have to move past it. You have to think about what you can do to make things better.
When it traveled across South Florida, it had weakened from a hurricane, Cat 1, to a tropical storm. So when it emerged in the Gulf of Mexico and we thought it was going to move towards the panhandle of Florida, obviously projections were a lot different. And the forecast changed, and the bullseye was New Orleans.
Foxcaster Janice Dean is tracking Katrina from the Fox News Weather Center. Janice, what's the latest?
Well, it looks like the track has shifted slightly, ever so slightly, to the west, making the pit stop on New Orleans dead center. So when it emerged in the Gulf of Mexico and we thought it was going to move towards the panhandle of Florida, obviously projections were a lot different. And the forecast changed, and the bullseye was New Orleans. This massive, unbelievably strong storm. Here is the latest track as of 5 p.m. Eastern time. Again, moving northwest, 13 miles per hour. Category 5 upon landfall. And again, timeline shifting a little bit, perhaps 4 a.m., 5 a.m. as people are starting to get up tomorrow morning.
Based on the radar information, it likely weakened to a storm very temporarily over land. But then on the 26th, when it came off the coast on Wednesday, it became a hurricane very, very quickly again. Then the 27th, a major hurricane, Category 3 hurricane. The 28th of August, it became a Category 5 hurricane, and not just an intense Category 5 hurricane, it became a very, very large hurricane.
I do remember going to bed on a Saturday night when Katrina was a Category 3 and waking up the next morning several hours later and it was a Category 5. One of the strongest, if not the strongest, on record that year. But to actually predict the monster that Katrina would become was very difficult.
It was another miss. It's going to go to our east. No, really. I got to believe the model somewhat, that it's got some feel. But then the next run comes out and they move the center line track from Apalachicola and they put it right over New Orleans.
As of the 5 p.m. Eastern advisory, it's still around 100 miles away southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River. 165 mile per hour sustained winds, Category 5, the highest category you can have on the Saffir-Simpson scale. The steering mechanism, high pressure, was stronger than we anticipated. And that's why the track diverted towards the west and then curled up towards one of the most vulnerable populations in the United States, New Orleans. It was just a matter of hours that this storm went from a Category 3, 125 mile per hour sustained winds, to 170 mile per hour sustained winds in just a matter of hours. That was textbook rapid intensification, and I think it was historic, certainly for that year.
People in southern Mississippi got plenty of warning that Katrina was coming and that it was going to be very, very bad. And they didn't have to imagine what really bad meant, because everybody that lives there knew about Camille that happened in 1969, and that put 24 feet of storm surge over the coast. But nobody imagined it could be worse.
You have to convey information that's so important for the general population and the path of the storm. But knowing in advance what the storm could do, and especially the day of when it was a Category 5, and if you look at the satellite presentation in the Gulf of Mexico, it is a huge storm. It takes up much of the Gulf of Mexico.
It's just before 8 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 p.m. in Louisiana, where we are just hours away from feeling the wrath of Hurricane Katrina. She's expected to make landfall around 5 a.m. tomorrow morning Eastern Time.
Communicating in a potential catastrophic disaster is not just about, is there a hurricane warning, is there a storm surge warning? It really is much more about, what are we going to do about it? So being a meteorologist in the hurricane zone is really more than studying meteorology. It's also studying the community and understanding the various factors that affect how that community is going to respond when the storm comes in, if the storm comes in, and if it might come in, because you have to respond before you really know exactly what's going to happen. So the bottom line is you have to not only study meteorology, but you need to understand emergency management. Those are the people that are responsible for keeping people safe. The big lesson is that the worst does happen. Situations occur that are worse than you can imagine. We saw that in Katrina, we saw that here in South Florida in Hurricane Andrew, where most people along the coast at some point have had the idea, that it's not going to happen to them. It's somewhere else, but it very well might. In 2005, when Katrina happened, it was only 4 years after 9/11. And after 9/11, the government changed its focus and the focus of emergency management from natural disasters to terrorism. But Katrina proved that we have to keep maximum focus on both possibilities. And the government has indeed improved the natural disaster response as a result of that. So it changed everybody's understanding of what's required, what we have to be ready for in terms of natural disasters and emergency management.
We only have so much control over what we do as broadcast meteorologists. I give you the information I have to the best of my ability, and then it's up to you to do what you're going to do with that forecast, right? So I tell you that there's a potential catastrophic storm headed for one of the most vulnerable areas across the Gulf Coast. What are you going to do with that information? And then it's up to officials, local officials, state officials, to listen to those warnings from the scientists and decide what they're going to do with the people that they represent. And Katrina's not a very good example of good communication.
Well, we're waiting on the latest advisory, Lori, and I'm hoping that producers, once they hear what these winds are, the sustained winds, they will tell me and we'll relay it to you. Usually, sometimes these advisories come out a little bit earlier than we anticipated, but this one is taking its sweet time.
I think about Katrina because we are really doing important work in terms of, again, trying to give you the best information we possibly can and relaying that message to people that can make a difference to their community. There were times where I had to sort of center myself, but I remember being on that night and holding back tears, delivering the forecast and knowing how bad this could be. I mean, this was a worst-case scenario for New Orleans. We were talking about the storm surge overtopping the levees and inundating New Orleans. This was potentially coming true, a worst-case scenario for the most vulnerable city along the Gulf Coast.